This is Trump's views on abortion over the years.
Partial birth abortion, the eliminating of abortion in the third trimester, big issue in Washington. Would President Trump ban partial birth abortion?
Well, look, I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I listen to people debating the subject. But I just believe in choice. And again, it may be a little bit of a New York background because there is some different attitude in different parts of the country. And, you know, I was raised in New York and grew up and work and everything else in New York City. But I am strongly for choice, and yet I hate the concept of abortion.
But you would not ban it?
No.
Or ban partial birth abortion?
No, I am pro-choice in every respect and as far as it goes, but I just hate it.
I'm pro-life.
Because you have said that Planned Parenthood, they do some good things, you say. Are you surprised to see what's spilling out in Congress now with Republicans?
No, because they feel very people that are Republicans, like myself, think it's disgusting, some of the tapes that came out and some of the views. Now, you know, they're fighting it, Planned Parenthood is fighting it, but if you look at what's going on with those tapes, anybody that watches those tapes cannot be a fan of Planned Parenthood.
But what our reporting
And you know
shows...
what? They had bad representatives, because when you watch some of those doctors talking so cavalierly about what obviously is human life, I think it's disgraceful.
Okay, but Carly Fiorina has made this a big point of her campaign, talking about the video, right? The Planned Parenthood video.
Well, that was a different video, though. That's a different, you know, there were some videos that were, if that was really a video, I guess that they say was not a correct video.
Right.
But there were plenty of, I don't know anything about that.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, she's been hit very hard on that because they say it wasn't correct. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak to that video. But I've seen some of the other videos that were absolutely correct, and I think it's disgraceful what...
Well, the biggest problem I have with Planned Parenthood is the abortion situation. I mean, it's like an abortion factory, frankly, and you can't have it, and you just shouldn't be funding it, and that should not be funded by the government, and I feel strongly about that. And that's my biggest problem with Planned Parenthood, because it really, if you look at it and you look at the work they do, it really has become so heavily centered on abortion, and you can't have that.
I am pro-life, yes.
What is ban? How do you ban abortion? How do you actually do it?
Well, you know, you'll go back to a position like they had, where people will perhaps go to illegal places.
Yeah.
But you have to ban it.
You ban it and they go to somebody who flunked out of medical school.
Are you Catholic?
Yes, I think
And how do you feel about the Catholic Church's position?
I accept the teaching authority of my church on moral issues.
But do you know their position on abortion?
Yes, I do.
And do you concur with that position?
I concur with their moral position, but legally I get to the question. Here's my problem with it.
No, but let me ask you, but what do you say about...
It's not funny.
Your church. Yeah, it's really not a funny thing. What do you say about your church? They're very strong.
They're allowed to, but the churches make their moral judgments, but you running for president of the United States will be chief executive of the United States. Do you believe believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years,
I don't know. That I don't know.
Why not?
I don't know.
You take positions and everything else.
I do take positions and everything else. It's a very complicated position.
Do you want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact states, a woman's right to abortion?
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that that will go back to the individual states.
But I'm asking you specifically, would you like to...
If they overturned it, it'll go back to the states.
But what I'm asking you, sir, is do you want to see the court overturn? You just said you want to see the court protect the Second Amendment. Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination.
So a good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court, worthy as treatment of precedent like any other.
The House is moving forward with a plan to ban abortions after 20 weeks, but that bill faces an uphill battle in the Senate. So what, if anything, will be done to get something on the president's desk? Chief Legal Correspondent Shannon Bream joins me now with a look at the political and legal issues at stake. Good evening, Shannon. So it's passed the House. Now what?
Well, one lawmaker I talked to today said for this to go anywhere in the Senate, it literally would take a miracle or divine intervention. It's been there before back in 2015 when Democrats controlled the Senate. They easily blocked it. But you know, as a minority party, they can do that as well this time around because you got to get those 60 votes just to get it procedurally moving to any debate. That is a tough hill for this bill from the House. I talked to Congressman Trent Franks, GOP member who sponsored this bill. He says that 60 vote threshold in the Senate, he's calling it a huge problem. Here's what he said.
That's the only rule like it in any parliamentary body in the world that I know of where the majority of the body cannot bring a bill to the floor for debate and amendment. But that is the case right now.
I think we should bring it to the floor, and I think they will bring it to the floor. And in the coming new year, we're going to have this on the floor, and we should actually have this debate.
Of course, the president has said he will sign this bill, but there are plenty of Democrats and lawmakers out there in the Senate saying that's not going to be necessary. It won't get past them. And they say even if it did, they view this as completely unconstitutional.
We've seen a lot of abortion cases, obviously, through the courts. What about the legality of this particular bill?
There have been states that have passed 20-week bans, and they've had varying success. The Ninth Circuit, which we know leans to the left, has struck down these bans out of Arizona and Idaho. North Carolina's got one at 18 weeks. That's tied up in litigation. In Georgia, the state Supreme Court there said it wouldn't hear a case about the ban on the 20 weeks there. So the Supreme Court has not heard this kind of case. Now, when Arizona lost at the Ninth Circuit, they tried to appeal this to the Supreme Court. They didn't take the case. Right now, there's another issue playing out at the Supreme Court we've been watching with Missouri. They've been fighting. Planned Parenthood has a couple of restrictive abortion bills there. They put in an emergency request with the Supreme Court because they wanted those bills tossed. They've now withdrawn that request from the Supreme Court because they got a favorable lower court ruling, but that's one of those cases that could end up there.
Senator, I said that it's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court entitled to respect under principles of stare decisis. And one of the important things to keep in mind about Roe v. Wade is that it has been reaffirmed many times over the past 45 years.
As Richard Fallon from Harvard said, Roe is not a super precedent because calls for its overruling have never ceased, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled. It just means that it doesn't fall on the small handful of cases like Marbury versus Madison and Brown versus the board that no one questions anymore.
The primary reason that Roe was overturned on Friday was because in 2016, evangelical Christians joined together with conservative Catholics and they elected a president who kept his promise to appoint 3 conservative pro-life justices to the Supreme Court. Thank God for President Donald J. Trump.
Just think about this. We welcome back Mark Thiessen and Harold Ford Jr. to the panel. We talked a lot about debates and when some candidates did debates and some didn't do them. Had the October 25th debate been September 30th, would this race have changed? Mark?
I think it might have, or maybe it wouldn't have. I mean, I think there's a broader issue here, which is that, so think about this. We have the worst inflation in 4 decades, the worst collapse in real wages in 40 years, the worst crime wave since the 1990s, the worst border crisis in U.S. history. We have Joe Biden, who is the least popular president since Harry Truman, since presidential polling happened, and there wasn't a red wave. That is a searing indictment of the Republican Party. That is a searing indictment of the message that we have been sending to the voters. They looked at all of that and looked at the Republican alternative and said, no thanks. The Republican Party needs to do a really deep introspection look in the mirror right now, because this is an absolute disaster for the Republican Party, and we need to turn back.
I do want to talk about the issue of abortion, which is important to a lot of voters all across the country. Just this week, women in Idaho and Tennessee, I don't know if you saw this, filed suit against their state saying their lives were put at risk after they were denied abortion services because their state's restrictive laws put in place after Roe was overturned. So my question for you, Mr. President, is how is it acceptable in America that women's lives are at risk, doctors are being forced to turn away patients in need, or risk breaking the law?
Ready? A little bit of a long answer. I hope you have time.
I hope you have time. Okay. I'm here for as long as you have.
Roe v. Wade. For 52 years, people, including Democrats, wanted it to go back to states so that states could make the right. Roe v. Wade, I did something that nobody thought was possible, and Roe v. Wade was terminated, was put back to the states. Now, people, pro-lifers, have the right to negotiate for the first time. They had no rights at all, because the radical people on this are really the people, the Democrats, that say after 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, and even after birth, you're allowed to terminate the baby.
Democrats aren't saying that. I just have to. Democrats are not saying that. Does it bother you, though, that women say their lives are being put at risk? Do you feel you bear any responsibility? Because, as you say, you are responsible for having Roe v. Wade overturned.
This is an issue that's been going on for a long time, and it's a very polarizing issue. Because of what's been done, and because of the fact we brought it back to the states, we're going to have people come together on this issue. They're going to determine the time, because nobody wants to see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Nobody wants to see abortions when you have a baby in the womb. I said with Hillary Clinton when we had the debate, I made a statement, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month. You're allowed to do that, and you shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Again, no one is arguing for that. That's not a part of anyone's platform, Mr. President.
The Democrats are able to kill the baby after birth.
Let me talk to you.
Nobody wants that.
Democrats don't want that
so
either.
We're going to come together.
I want to know what you want. I want to know what you're going to do if you're reelected.
We are going to come together.
Would you sign federal legislation that would ban abortion at 15 weeks?
No. Let me just tell you what I do. I'm going to come together with all groups, and we're going to have something that's acceptable. Right now, to my way of thinking, the Democrats are the radicals, because after 4 and 5 and 6 months, but you have to say this, after birth. You have New York State and other places that pass legislation where you're allowed to kill the baby after birth.
Mr. President, I want to give voters who are going to be weighing in on this election a very clear sense of where you stand on this.
I think they're all going to like me. I think both sides are going to like me.
What's going to have to happen
is you're going to have to
listen.
You're asking me a question. What's going to happen is you're going to come up with a number of weeks or months. You're going to come up with a number that's going to make people happy, because 92% of the Democrats don't want to see abortion after a certain period of time.
If a federal ban landed on your desk, if you were reelected, would you sign it at 15 weeks?
Are you talking about a complete ban?
A ban at 15 weeks?
Well, people are starting to think of 15 weeks. That seems to be a number that people are talking about right now.
Would you sign that?
I would sit down with both sides and I'd negotiate something, and we'll end up with peace on that issue for the first time in 52 years. I'm not going to say I would or I wouldn't. I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that goes too far?
I think what he did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake. But we'll come up with a number. But at the same time, Democrats won't be able to go out in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months and allow an abortion.
Mr. President, when you talk about negotiating, I think a lot of people think to themselves, this is an issue that they care about deeply in their hearts.
Oh, I care about it too.
They know where they stand, and they want to know where you stand. As you know, some anti-abortion groups are really looking for some clarity from you. So let me just ask you to put a fine point on this. Should the federal government impose any abortion restrictions, or should it be completely left up to the states?
No, I don't think you should be allowed to have abortions well into a pregnancy.
But what about the question I just asked you?
No, we're going to agree to a number of weeks or months or however you want to define it. and both sides are going to come together, and both sides, and this is a big statement, both sides will come together, and for the first time in 52 years, you'll have an issue that we can put behind us.
At the federal level?
It could be state or it could be federal. I don't frankly care.
So you're not committed to a ban at the federal level?
I will say this, everybody, including the great legal scholars, love the idea of Roe v. Wade terminated so it be brought back to the states.
It sounds like that's what you think, too, that it should remain a state issue.
I would say this, from a pure standpoint, from a legal standpoint, I think it's probably better, but I can live with it either way. It's much more important. The number of weeks is much more important. But something will happen with the number of weeks, the amount of time, after which you can't do it. And you know what? The most powerful people that are anti-abortion are okay with that now. And you know what? They weren't okay with that even a year ago.
Your former Vice President, Mike Pence, believes that a fetus should have constitutional rights. Do you believe that, Mr. President?
Well, Mike Pence said something about 15 weeks, too, which was a big change for Mike Pence because Mike Pence had no exceptions. I have exceptions, by the way. I think people should have exceptions. I think if it's rape or incest or the life of the mother, I think you have to have exceptions.
Does a fetus have constitutional rights, Mr. President?
And a lot of people, when they don't have exceptions. Now, I will tell you that I think most people, most Republicans are willing. You go life of the mother, rape, incest. I think most of them are there.
But should a fetus
That's a big
have
statement.
constitutional rights, Mr. President?
Well, I don't know what he's saying because before he wanted, you couldn't have abortion.
But what are you saying?
Now all of a sudden,
you think?
excuse me. Now all of a sudden he's saying 15 weeks. I said, wow, where did that come from? That's a radical change. Look, something is going to happen that's going to be good for everybody. And that's what I'm almost like a mediator in this case. They wanted Roe v. Wade terminated because it was inappropriate. We got it done. Something is going to happen. It's going to be a number of weeks. Something's going to happen where both sides are going to be able to come together. And then we'll be able to go into other things like the economy, our military.
Are you saying a federal ban with exceptions? Is that what you're saying?
What I say is very simple, because you can't put words in my mouth like that.
I
because
just
you've been
want to
hearing me talk
understand.
about this issue, and
Yeah.
I think talk about it very productively. It could be a state ban. It could be a federal ban. But Democrats want that, too. Democrats don't want to see abortion in the 7th month. Okay, I speak to a lot of Democrats. They want a number. There is a number, and there's a number that's going to be agreed to. And Republicans should go out and say the following, because I think the Republicans speak very inarticulately about this subject. I watched some of them without the exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. I said, other than certain parts of the country, you're not going to win on this issue, but you will win on this issue when you come up with the right number of weeks, because Democrats don't want to be radical on the issue, most of them, some do. They don't want to be radical on the issue. They don't want to kill a baby in the 7th month or the 9th month or after birth. And they're allowed to do that, and you can't do that.
You're going to vote in Florida later this year. I mean, have you made up your mind how you're going to vote in their abortion referendum?
But I do want more than 6 weeks. I want more than 6 weeks. I think 6 weeks is a mistake. And I'll be expressing that soon, but I want more than 6 weeks. In Florida, we have a 6-week program, and that's what I believe that you're voting on, and I think it should be more than 6 weeks.
During an interview with the Daily Mail, by the way, he said something similar to NBC News as well, Donald Trump signaled that he plans to vote against Florida's 6-week abortion ban in an upcoming referendum that would actually loosen these abortion restrictions to the standard that the state was able to enjoy under Roe v. Wade. Now, he called it a terrible mistake when DeSantis first signed the ban, but up to this point, he's been kind of coy in answering questions about the referendum. Now he's making his intentions pretty clear, and like any politician, he's checking the polls. He's understanding how much the abortion issue not only hurt him, but hurt the Republican Party. And so he is kind of going along with what the majority of voters want here.
With only 67 days to go before Election Day, former President Donald Trump is facing some backlash from some of his most ardent supporters over comments he made about abortion. The former president said he believes Florida's new 6-week abortion ban is too restrictive and signaled that he would vote to overturn it, only to reverse himself late this afternoon. CBS's Caitlin Huey-Burns reports.
Donald Trump's sudden claim that he plans to make IVF free if elected has stumped some of his supporters.
The government is going to pay for it, or we're going to get or mandate your insurance company to pay for it, which is going to be great. We're going to do that.
The former president has not yet detailed how the government would pay for the treatments, which could cost billions of dollars a year. But his proposal comes as he faces a significant gender gap in his campaign against Kamala Harris. CBS News polling shows the vice president leads Trump among voters who say abortion is a major factor in their vote. The issue will also be on the ballot in Trump's home state of Florida in November, where voters will decide whether to codify abortion rights into the state's constitution up to the period of gestation. After signaling an openness this week to supporting that measure, Trump closed the door in an interview on Friday.
So I think 6 weeks, you need more time than 6 weeks. I've disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it. At the same time, the Democrats are radical because the 9 months is just a ridiculous situation. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
But Trump's criticism of the Florida law and his pledge to have the government fund IVF has worried some top conservative leaders.
He runs the risk of de-energizing, motivating his base by moving away from an issue that has been and continues to be a prominent issue. Backing away from that fundamental principle that the party has championed for 45 years is a big deal.
And meanwhile, Democrats aren't giving Trump any credit, arguing he is the one who put IVF in jeopardy by nominating the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade, a decision, Nancy, that Trump told me just last week he has no regrets about.